Ship. This week, I've got a new friend on called Adam Rich. Now, if you haven't heard of Adam before, Adam was the founder, is the founder of Thrillist. So, if you're not familiar with Thrillist, it's a fantastic lifestyle media site that's been out for a really long time, and started as a notable newsletter and has continued to expand onto this day. But it's been a great place if you're ever trying to figure out, what's cool in this world. Thrillist has always been a great place to start. Adam is also someone known for having a great mind for creating content. No surprise with his background in Thrillist. But what you might not know about Adam is he also happens to have a great mind for building interesting and new businesses. Even from the earliest days of Thrillist, he was thinking about different ways to organize his team and whether working remotely and other different aspects that we've been thinking about today. He's been thinking about since the early 2000s. So he and I decided that we wanted to chat about the future of work, but probably more specifically asking it today, is work broken? And so with that, I welcome you to another week of O Ship. We're going to have a great and lively debate. Adam, welcome to O Ship. How are you?
Hey, Freddie, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I like that you've got like a whole you've blended into the nautical colors in the background there. This is very on brand. I appreciate you doing that for me.
Yeah, the painters just left, so I'm glad it's
Perfect.
working.
Real commitment to the show. This is my other guests have never backed me up like that. This is the kind of guy you are. I like that.
Well, longtime fan, first time caller.
Perfect. So, Adam, I give a little bit of a setup for some of your background. I'd love for people to get to know you a bit better. I mean,
Yeah,
you started Thrillist when you were pretty young. Can you tell me a little bit about starting the business and what it was like for you guys in the beginning?
yeah. I mean, look, the best time to start a business is when you're too young and stupid to know what the odds are on it. So that was me and my co-founder. And yeah, I mean, we started working on Thrillist when I was 24, a couple years out of school, and got it going when I was smart enough to know that it was a time when I uniquely had very little to lose, and when it was time to consider quitting my day job. Kind of took stock of things and was like, I don't have a wife, I don't have kids who need their teeth fixed. If this fails, I'll feel like a loser, but I'll move into my parents' basement and then put it back together again. So that was kind of the calculus at the time. So yeah, I mean, that was back in 2004.
And so give me a sense of what the company was like in terms of number of people and the kind of like what was the mix of like all the
Yeah,
body of the business, and obviously that involved quite a lot. I mean, you had been doing it for a long time.
yeah. Well, I mean, initially it was myself and my college friend with whom I started the thing, and a freelance writer. And so, I think part of why I'm so fascinated by the fact that everybody's coming around to this, like, is work broken? And like, what's going on with the office is that, from jump, we didn't have a typical kind of employee kind of workplace kind of thing. Cause, our first employee was a freelancer. And then really shortly afterwards, Thrillist's initial product was and I think it still can be considered to be a core offering of what we do is local newsletters that tell you about the best stuff in your city, and that required having people on the ground in every market that we serve.
That makes sense. And then at some point you guys did pull together, I think, an office. I assume it was in New York.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I mean, do you miss that part of the business as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was a very lively place. I think that, it was an open floor plan, which in my kind of experience, there's like a sweet spot as far as the size of a thing like that. I think, I asked myself, is work broken pretty regularly toward the end of my tenure at Thrillist, when I would walk into the office and it would be, 150 people in an open pit with noise canceling headphones slacking each other from 6 feet away. Like that, just
Yeah.
that, like, I don't feel like I need to spend, the square foot rent in Soho to have a bunch of people like doing their best to ignore the fact that they're in the same space as people.
Yeah, yeah, a fair a fair point. And then just to get a sense of it, was so you had was that like kind of peak size, 150 people in Soho. I can't even try to imagine. I don't even want to know what the rent for that would be. I'm sure it'd make me weep a little bit.
Oh
So
no! I mean, every time we looked at that, we thought work is broken.
yeah, yeah,
No, I mean that was the size of the like editorial and audience team, which
yeah,
I ended up directly overseeing.
yeah.
And but it was Soho, so the buildings like nobody had a square like a floor plan that could accommodate the 600 700 people that we were at that point. And so it was like we had something like 8 different leases in the same office, and so you had the one on this floor and one over here, and then you walk through another to get to that one, and it was like
It's like working
very
remotely in the same building.
yeah, it was very Lego.
And so, you touched on this concept of work being broken, and you mentioned asking yourself that several times. But when you really think about it, what's your answer? What is your feeling on that? And I guess why?
Well, I think it's worth like looking at how this question is on everybody's mind in context, because I think that you can look at the the things that feel like they're going wrong, and it's a little bit of like a boiling the frog thing where it was like meetings were kind of bloating and people were getting too many emails and Slack was kind of taking over your workplace experience, and so you had a lot of these encroaching factors, and then the pandemic hit, and then there was no office, and then there was no kind of bonhomie of being in the same space or having the break room or having a beer when everybody closes their laptop lid. And it sort of interrupted that boiling the frog thing. And everybody kind of took a minute and looked around and was like, wait a minute, this sucks.
Mm. What's your I guess offices? I think you would argue. I guess, are you arguing for them or are you arguing against them?
Look, I think that the office is a really formidable workplace tool. But in the way that, you wouldn't go around your house trying to fix everything with a hammer, everything
Mm.
shouldn't be put through the office.
Mm. One of the things that's happened to us recently that makes me think a lot about this. Obviously, anyone who's watched those ship for a while knows like that. Chameleon Collective has never had an office and never will have an office if we have anything to do with it. But it's not something that it's hard to take a company that I think has had offices historically and then to say we're never going to have them again. One of the reasons it works for Chameleon Collective is because we've recruited from day one for people that want to work that way. And I think so. I think in our case it works for us, but I agree it's not for everyone. But
Yeah, and I think it can also be tough if you have some people in an office and some people not. Like that
yeah,
that's a very
that's when it gets
imbalanced.
weird. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
But we're the thing that made me think about this more lately, and it's very timely for the subject we've got today, is in the last couple of days, some good news. So I had a good week. I found out that Chameleon Collective got ranked as, I think it was by Forbes. I want to make sure I use the exact wording. I think it was America's America's top startup employers. And so we showed up on this list. For me, that was a really big deal. It put me in a really, really great mood. And they had all their algorithms of how they selected all this stuff, but it made me start reflecting on the fact that sometimes we've gone out there and we wanted to get ranked on like best places to work, and because we didn't have an office, we couldn't even like we couldn't even qualify. Basically, we weren't even up for consideration. And so I thought, I kind of know. I just think that's kind of weird. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's just like a people are going to start going back and updating that stuff now, but I don't know if that does qualify it. But I can think about like lots of periods, and maybe if there had if it's not just about like best places to work, that's one thing. If you want to have America's coolest offices, cool, great, I get
Right.
it. But I don't think that should be a determinant on best places to work. I think some people do that well, and some people just don't do that well. So what do you think makes, arguing for offices for a second, What, and you were talking about the folks with all the headphones on and just kind of slack each other. And I had a startup once called Guide where we were super guilty of that. It was like around the time everyone started using Slack, we'd slack each other around the table. It was ridiculous.
Sure.
We weren't even at separate desks. It was just it's just one giant table. We're still slacking each other. So what makes a good office environment then
Well,
in
I
today's
mean,
world? Yeah.
I think it's really easy to go and be like, oh, like the best office environment, you've got like ping pong tables and like cool art and stuff like that. And I think, that's fun, sure. But I think it's about just like using the office for the things that it's good for, and not making everybody get in there every day to put on their headphones and deal with whatever kind of commute that they're
Yeah.
having. But like, I think that this period of like enforced remoteness has caused me to reflect on like the things that like really clang when you're trying to do it over a Zoom. And like the
Mm-hmm.
two things that I like most consistently come back to are unstructured collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
where it's the micro cues. It's like hearing the person catch a breath and you know that they're about to speak. It's like all those little ways that like the human animal is socialized to live in packs and can kind of like work together. I think that whether it's micro lag and or latency in the feed, or just like not being able to have the fidelity to kind of pick up on some of these little cues, like that sort of unstructured collaboration and conversation just really suffers. And I think I'm not this is not news
Mm-hmm.
to anybody. But also I think persuasion. I think
Mm-hmm.
persuasion is like one of these things where whether you're trying to close a deal or get somebody to see something your way, there's something about the human again. And I think this just comes down to the fact that like, we're not that far evolutionarily speaking from just being like straight up animals. And the thing of like having another animal in your space, there's like a danger component, there's a seriousness, there's something where it's like, this is a person that is like near enough to me that I need to actually pay attention and take them seriously because like, we're all on the survival spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think that what that translates into when you're talking about work stuff is just like an immediacy and an ability to like persuade and like and sort of impress upon somebody the your presence as a factor in a conversation.
One layering in on something you said about 30 seconds ago, and given that the show is called Oh Ship, I feel compelled to acknowledge an Oh Ship moment I had about a year and a half ago, where a client and I were talking, and they had said something that was funny, and I was laughing about that, but then they had changed the subject to something that was serious right afterwards, a family thing. And due to
Ooh.
a video lag, my laughing came out right at the serious part, something that had happened to one of his kids.
Oh
And it was
no.
like, and then it was like I had to then unexplain that it was actually a video lag, as this guy was like, it might rank it as one of the top 10 most awkward moments of my life. Actually,
Oh
it
man.
was bad. So yeah, three cheers for video lag on that one. So yeah,
Yep.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Um, but going back to this kind of sense of this tribalness, I think that we all have. When people do get together, I think that there needs to be a real meaning for them to do it. I'm in a place where like I'm happy to travel and get together for meetings, but I feel like there's like it's like almost like an ROI calculation,
Sure.
like if for a client meeting or gathering, let's not even make it about clients, just people you need to collaborate with.
Yep.
How many hours of travel is it for you personally before you're like, yeah, it's not worth it? Is it over 5, over
Yeah.
3? You know what I mean?
I guess I'd kind of turn that question back around on you, Freddie,
Yeah.
and ask why a meeting is important. Because
Mm,
I think that there's such a modern reflexiveness around making something into a meeting that kind of comes from like there being this widespread notion of like consensus being kind of the way that you move forward in like a modern and like
mm,
kind of startup environment, or call it what you want. But I think that there are like if you really push on it, like if the meeting is with a client and it's to seal a deal, then yeah, that's absolutely a meeting. And
yeah,
I think if it's worth having in person.
yeah,
If it's like a critical brainstorm to set strategy, then that's a meeting and it's worth having in person. But so many things that are meetings are actually like a failure to delegate and trust, and
Mm,
and and a failure of leadership to choose metrics and stick to those
mm.
things. And so to basically say, hey, you know what, like you're the head of product, like here's what like the organization needs out of this, out of what we're talking about. Here's the enterprise
Mm,
demands. It's a product thing, so you choose, and then we're going to look at these numbers to see if you were
mm,
right. And it's like, okay, that could have been a bunch of weeklies, or now
mm.
it can be somebody who's been given their kind of like runway to make a choice and be the accountable person.
Mm. You mentioned accountability and trust there, and I think those are things that when you're having digital meetings with video or whatever, phone calls, when the trust is there, everything else is easy. Is it weird that when I think about traveling now, that actually I think the most valuable reason I'd be traveling isn't actually for the meetings, but it's to have meals with people. It's actually the lunches and dinners that's the most valuable reason, because that's the moment where I feel like I build more connections with people not talking about work, so that when we do talk about work over this, the trust is there more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm flying to Stockholm in about a week and a half for exactly this reason.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is that, like, people trust people. People don't trust proposals or decks
Mhm.
or
It's true.
strategies, you know? And so,
Mm.
like, and that's the thing where people who have been in the office and have now gone remote have a real advantage over people who met one another remotely, where they don't have that thing of, like, I've been around this person, I've had a beer with them, they're real, I understand kind of where they're coming from, and I'm reassured that like this is just another person, and they're, and I can like touch, and they're tangible.
One of the things we talked about once is this. You talked about this concept that I thought was really brilliant about like intentionality, like this concept that when you do get together, there's this focus on intentional work and being present. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, where it's like, what's an office for? Like, what does it do well? What does it not do well? And
Mm,
and kind of picking the right tool for the job. I had this conversation with like a fellow entrepreneur who was like freaking out about a lease he just signed and how expensive it was. And meanwhile, he's got the headphones and Slack and like laptops and
mm,
meetings thing happening as well. And one of the things we were talking about is like, could you do a thing where two companies share one office? They get exclusive use of the office one day a week. And then the rest of the week, anybody can come in and it's basically like a co working space. But for that
mhm,
one day a week, you get in there, no computers, everybody's using a pad and pencil, you're
mhm,
in
mhm.
meetings, you
Let's talk.
cluster all, yeah, you like cluster all the off-sitey kind of stuff, all the collaborative kind of stuff, and you're just like, for this one day a week, like we're in here and we're using the fact that we're IRL to basically generate a lot of alignment, a lot of consensus, a lot of new ideas. And then the rest of the week, you want to get out of your apartment, great, you got a desk. If you want to work at home and not have to worry about headphones and have like your music on, or you're quiet, or be staring out your nice window, great, you do that. You do you choose how to kind of get it done the rest of the week, but that you're very, very deliberate about there being one day a week where everybody's there focused on the fact that you're among one another.
Mm. A lot of what you just talked about, I see, is like it's like the culture of work, right? So this isn't about processes or systems or even where you show up. I think it's about the culture of the work environment that you live and operate and work in. Um, when you think about where things have been trending as the work over the last couple of years in particular, what are your other thoughts? What's better, what's worse in terms of some of the trends you're seeing in culture of work?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that it's a really, really good question right now because, if you think about like trend lines, it's like, a bunch of
Mhm,
like dots plotted on a point, and you're like, okay, here's where things are going. The last 2 years have been such a disruption where things have spiked and like gone all over the place because like we're trying to figure out what's happening. It's a moving target. Can we go back to the office? Oh, no, there's a variant. And
mhm,
so I think that it's a really open question as to like when things stop being quite as volatile, where that kind of trend line picks up,
Mm-hmm.
whereas like if you zoom out a decade, 2 years of COVID weirdness will still be something that gets factored into an overall trend line. And so I think that you're definitely going to see the trends of like remote work being a thing. I think the I guess it's a long way of saying I'm not quite sure, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
the thing that we can say for sure is that, as you say, work culture is something that very few places have figured out how to translate into an
Mm-hmm.
all remote, all
Mm-hmm.
digital modality.
It's interesting. I hadn't. This is. I have never really thought about this before, so this is a little bit of an unfinished idea, but it's good conversation. I think. When I think about you going back to this concept of trust that we talked about a minute ago, so you could argue there's different types of trust in the work environment. There is. Trust where it's professional trust. So we can work remotely together, and we've had dozens or potentially hundreds of interactions, and those interactions go, I like this person, I trust them professionally. It is a certain level of trust. Then you then have another level of trust that I think is born out of intimate moments or personal. I don't mean intimate in any kind of weird way, but just more personal. Outside, gently caressing your
Freddie,
coworkers' faces, yeah, massaging people. No, none of that stuff, obviously. But I mean, like being out of work. Some of those things. Yeah, you can look. I've had time. Plenty of social times where I'm meeting with people remotely, but I also think there's something about the trust that's built by having a big night out with someone or having an evening
totally.
where you spend 3 or 4 hours talking over a glass of wine and really, really getting to know them. And so I feel like sometimes these trusts impacts the way that we work with each other, and it also for all the leaders out there, it certainly impacts the way that you lead people. And
Hmm.
one of the areas that I think that this gets really heavily impacted by is feedback, because feedback is all about trust.
Hmm.
When a coworker or a team member or employee or whatever you want to call it, takes feedback from you, that feedback is always better received when they trust you. Does that make sense? Because they know
Totally.
it's coming from a good place. And so this is one of the areas I feel like it starts to struggle a bit more, because sometimes the video, while it's perfectly good at communicating and getting the job done, maybe sometimes isn't as good at building some of the trust and the intimacy that is makes a great fabric in a business.
I couldn't agree more. I actually like hearing you kind of talk about the two kinds of trust.
Mm,
I completely agree. I would almost sort of suggest like a semantic shift a little bit, because
mm,
the first kind of trust I completely agree with, and I think professionally that comes out of you know basically allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and that like you're
mhm,
relying on this person and then they
mhm,
follow through, and that's trust. It's because
mhm.
like you were vulnerable, they didn't let you down. That's building trust. The big night out is like it's affection, and again, not to be weird like that, like, but it's affection for the person
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
like
yeah,
they're a human being, not
yeah.
just a
Yeah,
resource.
exactly. When people, you take your guard down, and
Hmm.
when I talk about intimacy, obviously, I mean that it's
Yep.
going behind the veil, and I think that can help.
Yeah, and I think that when you are giving feedback, like feedback is inherently risky, right? It's like if it's actually worth saying, it's going to be something that is delicate, because it's if it has some kind of value, it is you telling a person like how you feel. It's about them. It's about you. There, it's got high stakes. Let's just say
Mhm,
if it's any kind of real feedback.
mhm,
And so if you have a foundation of that kind of trust and intimacy, or trust and affection, however you want to kind of characterize it as,
mhm,
like that's the thing where, you know, if I'm hearing you tell me something, Freddie, that's like a little hard to hear, and maybe you characterize it in a way where like I get like a response,
mhm,
it's that foundation of trust and intimacy that
mhm.
helps me be like, okay, no, like that may have like landed a little weird on my ears, but this is Freddie. Like we
Yeah,
have a
yeah, exactly
thing.
right.
And
Yeah,
like you just keep rolling, like that kind
yeah.
of is like the shock
Mhm,
absorbers of the
mhm,
conversation. Whereas if you don't have that, you've got to have like perfect delivery of the feedback if you want to be able to get through the thing and have the
Mhm.
person on the other end feel like it was constructive and feel like
Mhm.
you weren't coming after them personally, or any of the different kinds of like pitfalls you can kind of
Mhm.
run into when someone's got something kind of sensitive to say.
Mhm. So it's funny that again, I haven't really thought about this before, but when people talk a lot about when we engage with each other in video, just like we're doing right now, how it is quite intimate, and you get exposure into people's lives, and people's kids run by, and their mom's there, sat your dogs run in the room, whatever it is, right? You're in their life, you're in their living room, but at the same time, it also is controlled windows. And so I feel like when you think about, let's use a leader as an example, which is a common theme here on our ship, your impressions of a leader may not be even made up from your interactions with them, especially let's call it an open floor plan office. It might be how you passively consume all their interactions with other people. And those things also impact people's, trust of you. Um, so they're really big, meaningful issues. I think that people need to be really conscious of now. And so much of what is leading and culture isn't what's said. It's all the
Mm-hmm.
things that are unsaid and all
Yep.
those little interactions that add up together.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I think that you're hitting on one of the major challenges of remote work is that you end up in an office gathering all this kind of bycatch information.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that you would Slack to somebody or pick up the
Mm-hmm.
phone or write an email about, but you see the way that the person is talking to somebody else, and you overhear what's going on in their conversation, or you catch wind of a project that you're not part of, but it helps keep you aware of what's happening across the company. And like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of loss of the bycatch really robs you of a lot of broader context,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that context is like, what's this person like, or can I trust this person, or is this guy a good guy? Because like maybe they're being nice to me, but I'm their boss, and maybe they're
Yeah.
being really awful to the people who have to answer to them.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I have an opinion. We'll see where yours nets out compared to mine. But if you took the last couple of years, and obviously all the things that's happened across the whole spectrum of things, uh, uh, was it a good thing for the culture of work, or has it been a bad thing for the culture of work?
I mean, I think it's been a bad thing for the culture of work, just it's been a bad thing for people, and because like that's like the I don't know, like I'm kind of this is another kind of half formed idea, but like I worry a little bit talking about like work. Like, is work broken? Like work is a process, and so it's like is like your job, is your like professional identity actually what we're talking about here, or is it like the productive time that you go that you're an employee, and like that's more than just work.
Mhm.
It's a lot about the kind of like identity that you're given, and I don't know, like I think maybe I need to think about this a little bit more, but
Yeah, no,
thinking about the last
it,
couple, you know what I mean, it's like
yeah, no,
it's
it's fair. I would argue that it, while being a little rough for the 2 years, I actually think on some level was the best thing that ever happened to work, but only because it. And this is my disruptive entrepreneur brain here. Only because it blew up everything,
yeah,
and sure, maybe we messed up a lot, and we've had some rough patches over the last couple of years, obviously, and it's been painful, and but it's massive periods of disruption. And so when I think is happening that while the last 2 years have been rough, I think the next 2 years could become, some of the golden age of modern work, let's call it, because it took anyone that was just refusing to change or evolve, and maybe they're not going to be, the bleeding edge of modern work, which isn't for everyone, by the way. But I
sure.
think it's going to take even the most staid and orgs that we're not evolving and saying, "Hey, we're gonna move them forward." So you've got some great questions. We're going to pop up from the audience. Been great to see you. A good engaged audience today. Again, thank you for all the people watching live today. So Aline Laura's, I can see, is tuning in today. Charlie Hugh Jones, thank you again. But again, I love this. This work as a process. Love this conception, not identity, and that's very helpful. So again, thanks to everyone that's tuning in and commenting in real time. If anyone who's watching the show live now has any specific questions for Adam and I, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to them. Assuming they're not totally insane.
No, I think you're touching on something really interesting, Freddie, and that's kind of like what that was kind of what I was mentioning before, where it's like let's say that things go back to normal, which like I think that like feels more and more illusory every day, but like
Yeah.
will people be broken of like the meeting culture, and like will it be the kind of thing where employees are trusted to execute their job and be like measured on whether it worked or not, like
Mhm.
that's going to be really interesting, because it's the meeting culture enables bad leadership. And
Mhm.
we don't really, like, most places don't really invest in people being leaders,
Mhm.
like how many people get promoted and are just like, okay, here's your new title, here are your people, like, good luck, here's what we
Good
need from
luck.
you. And it's like that's terrible,
Yeah.
and I've been guilty of this as well. Like at Thrillist, I was very, very proud of doing a lot of internal promoting. I mean, that was the way that we kind of built our ranks. But I definitely could have done a much better job, like sitting down with people that are becoming new managers or taking on a team of a different scale, and like
Mhm.
being like, hey, like here's how to think about this, and here's how to
Mhm.
structure it, and here's when to bear down, and here's where to step back. And I think for me it was something that was one of the greatest pleasures of being an entrepreneur and building teams and stuff like that, is that I really loved the thing of like finding people and investing in them and giving them a challenge and letting them do it, and like helping them kind of work through it. Like that was like, I think, probably one of my greatest pleasures in having
Mhm.
built Phyllis. But I think like that's the kind of thing that like we have to kind of imagine is a cultivated skill, and something that like people don't just wake up one day knowing how to navigate.
So couldn't agree more. And let's address some of the new questions that have come in. Had two questions pop in. First one is from Adam Tovum, and he asks, "What are the best parts of remote work slash remote leadership, and what should we alter or obtain as we slide back into more in person working?"
Yeah, yeah, listen, I mean, I think about that. So let me zoom back to 2006.
No,
So
no
we
pun intended.
were, yeah, exactly. No Zoom then. So that was definitely a thing of the future. But when Thrillist launched our LA edition, our LA newsletter, I had an employee for the first time who was out in LA. Until then, it had been me and my people around a table in a shared workplace, and I had my guy in LA. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, like I'm managing this guy. He was an employee, but he was fully remote. I didn't know him personally. I didn't have a relationship yet. And I really quickly was like, all right, what do I need out of this role? And let's be super specific. What is the deliverable? When do I need it by? What makes it good? And I had to just like really all of a sudden take a step back and be so much more intentional as a leader. And basically, what I came to realize is like my guy in LA was awesome. He worked for us for over 10 years. He's like a personal friend of mine. But in that first moment where I couldn't know what was going on with him, he was not in an office. I didn't know whether he was coming in late. You know, I like had to be like, I care about getting this, and I can't care about the rest of that stuff. It's frankly not even my business. And that was a thing that that was a really challenging lesson as a 26-year-old new leader, for me to learn. But it was so critical to my go forward as a manager, and it was something that I took to people that were there in person. And so that idea of like,
So
what does
it's
being
almost like disconnecting from the process a little bit and being focused on the results, and then give
yep.
people a lot of freedom to kind of get work done the way they're going to get it done. As long as they get it done is the key part, right?
Totally, totally. And because the thing is, like, the process is frankly not your business. And
Hmm.
that's like a weird thing to tell somebody when they're employing somebody. But like if there are things about the process that you really object to, then
Yeah.
you should be able to, if they matter, you should be able to measure them in the outcome. And so like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say that this is my guy in LA and he's got to cover all the new restaurant scoops. And part of me is like, well, I hope that he's operating in this way because I don't want people to feel like he was a jerk. And so
Mm-hmm.
I can't be there part of his process, but I can know when we follow up with the restaurants that we covered that their anecdotal report of the experience has to be good. And that's an outcome, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that idea of, as a manager, being really, really deliberate about outcomes of remote employees where you can't look at process is actually the kind of thing that, like, the discipline of having remote resources like that
Mm-hmm.
is, we should all have that experience, and
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't go away if it's a thing you've learned how to go and do.
It goes back to that trust stuff that we talked about earlier as well. I'm going to pop up another question from the audience, and I think I'm going to take this one on personally. So this is from Elaine Lores. It says, "What do you recommend to build solid relationships with your freelancers that you don't know personally, who are remote?" Um, this is a great question, and so one of the things that we touched on earlier was this building of relationships. And so one of the things I think can happen when in pure remote relationships is that things can become very transactional. So it's like, part of me, because I'm a really, really, unfortunately, probably too busy guy, remote work has allowed me to crank out even more work because I'm not traveling in between meetings anymore. I'm just packing meetings now. I don't do meetings over 30 minutes typically, so I can pack in 16 meetings a day and sometimes more, which is a little crazy. I recognize, on a side note, uh, but but it can become very transactional because you're just trying to knock things out after, call after call after call, meeting after meeting after meeting. And so I think this is the same rules apply as in real life. Stop, breathe, find the time, more importantly, make the time to get to know these people. So yeah, you know what? Maybe you won't go out and have a beer with them in person or whatever, whatever your way of building relationships is with folks, coffees, whatever. But time is universal. And so, I'm just speaking personally, like at Chameleon Collective, I've probably spoken to almost every single person that's ever engaged with Chameleon Collective, even if it was just once for half an hour, because I want to be a good steward and representative of the company's culture. I want them to see me as an extension of that culture. I want to make sure that they're aligned with that culture. But I also recognize that part of our culture is that we're more than a company, that we know each other, and that there's a sense of friendship inside the group. Again, every company's culture is different, but in our case, that's something I try and do, and I think that can apply to everyone. So I think I guess my simple point is don't think of remote any different than real life. It's all about making time for people, and you just have to do it. And no matter how busy you are, you have to find value in those "I'm just getting to know you" meetings as much as the we're doing something that transacts money or value between us meetings. Um, so really good. And then I think jumping one last question from the audience. So this one is from Charlie Hugh Jones. He says, going back to a subject of kind of going back to normal, he goes, back to normal feels more illusory every day. Wonder whether you think, quote unquote, normal is a default heuristic of not having to cultivate, create, design our work experience. Um, any thoughts on that, Adam?
Yeah, look, I mean, normal is a strange, like, concept.
Mm-mm.
It really is kind of. Uh, I think about normal as like the baseline situational reality, like being consistent enough that you can come up with like a foundation for how you make decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
so normal could be wearing face masks, but like, around here, they're like, the mask mandate is being lifted. I think that the reason that the last couple of years have been so abnormal is just the speed at which there has been universal change around really basic aspects of like life. And so, you know, I definitely don't think that normal means that we all get to like stop being thoughtful. But
Mm,
I think that it means that we like can kind of like not be off balance like every time that you open the paper or talk to a friend.
yeah.
So I definitely appreciate that, like, that things being consistent doesn't mean that they become stale.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't really thought about it through the lens that they put out there. I sometimes wonder, like, I guess what did define normal? Obviously, there's accumulated experiences of all these different workforces that are out there, and everyone kind of follows a comparable model. But I think there's another part of it. It's like, and this is going to sound weird, but like, it's almost like what TV shows and movies regurgitate back to us what work is supposed to feel like and look like. Because that's, it's like you're seeing these kind of imaginary versions of what other people's jobs are, and then you're like, oh, I guess that's what normal looks like. And I think, to Charlie's point now, maybe the new normal is it's a little bit more of a boutique experience in the sense that you do have a greater degree of control over it. I think I would argue when I said earlier that I felt like, while extraordinarily disruptive, that maybe the last 2 years weren't the greatest for a lot of people, but I think it may usher in kind of a new era. A lot of the things that other people have been adopting lately, it seems like Adam and I have been practicing on various levels for the last 15 plus years, or in our case, 6 years or so. Um, and I think this kind of um, you know creating work environments that feel more personalized to the people, and embracing technologies and so on that allow us all to connect together. But more importantly, it seems like there's this really high degree of empathy, of saying, "Hey, I respect what you want to do in your personal life, and I'm going to help you build your job a little bit more around your life than making you build your life around your job." And I think that's maybe like an unsaid theme that's starting to happen more and more and more. I think that's what's happening. The Great Resignation. I think a lot of that is driven by people going, yeah, I kind of liked parts of the last couple of years because I got to do this, this, and this, and now I'm going to find a job that lets me do that. If my job doesn't want to let me do it, well, my job can stuff it then, and I'm gonna go make it happen. And
No,
and
I think that's a really great point. And to the extent that, like, we're talking about work being a process, and a person's process is their business, your
yeah,
employment is about your impact and about your results. And
mm,
so I think, if like what can come out of this is that employers more and more get comfortable with the idea that they're buying results, and
yeah,
that a person's process is the thing that happens, when they move to Boise, or when they're in the office, or when they're not, and is subsequently not really the employer's business because they're getting the impact, they're getting the result that they're buying. I think that that is a major step toward like one's lifestyle becoming more human and being more based around one's own individuality.
yeah. Here, here. I think that is an awesome place to jump off for this week. I feel like we could easily have a part two to this episode. I had a whole bunch of other things I wanted to get into today, but I enjoyed the chat so much I didn't want to disrupt or distract us. Adam, thank you again for finding some time to chat with us. I really, really enjoyed it. It was super fun, as expected. Um, what's the best way for people to follow up on you, or stay connected to you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, please just find me on LinkedIn, reach out, send me a message. I'd love to talk to you. As Freddie said, my background is in content and audience growth and all those kinds of media things for people in and out of media. And I'm a consultant myself. I'd be happy to help you out, or just chat with you. I'm nerdy for all this stuff. I love every part of business building and entrepreneurship and all that stuff. So I'm always happy to get to meet somebody who is nerdy along with me.
Yeah. On a side note, Adam is a perfect example of someone who I got to meet over the last couple of years. He and I have never had the pleasure of meeting in person. I know we genuinely like each other and are looking forward to that first, dinner or drinks or whatever one day. But this is a great example of like why when you find people that are really interesting, even if we don't get to see them in person, find the time to get to know them. If we hadn't have done that, then he wouldn't be here on those ship today. So again, thank you again, Adam. To all the people watching, As you know, thank you again for tuning in. Whether you're watching our live stream on any of the different platforms we stream on, or you're watching them afterwards on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, or LinkedIn. Again, thank you for your time. If you're listening on the audio podcast on any of the major podcasting platforms, thank you for listening in. And we look forward to seeing you on a future week of O Ship.